Aloha, everyone. Welcome to today's October 25th, 2021 uh, regular meeting of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I'd like to welcome board members and the manager, everyone else to this meeting. My name is Brian Andaya. I am the board chair. I'd like to take a moment to do a roll call of the board members present. When I say your name, please say aye. Vice Chair Kapuas Pro.
Aye.
Board Member Ray Soon.
Aye.
Board Member Max Sword.
Aye.
I believe we are waiting on a few more board members, but we do have quorum. Or did someone just join us? Board Member Naalehu Anthony.
Here.
Thank you. All right, Madam Secretary, please let me know when the other members join. Okay, Board Member Jade Butai. He'll probably acknowledge it is Mr. Bappa. All right, we do have quorum in any event. Also in the room with us today is Manager and Chief Engineer Ernest Lau and Board Secretary Joy Cruz Achu. Board Member Roger Babcock.
Here.
Thank you. Joining on WebEx to monitor public testimony is Mr. Stephen Nordstrom, Information Specialist 2 in our Communications Office. Joining us by WebEx are Jeff Lau and Jessica Wong, both from the City and County Corporation Council Department. As a reminder for those that are participating remotely, please mute your microphone if you haven't already, and only unmute when you intend to speak. If you encounter technical issues during today's meeting, please use the WebEx chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in a message to all WebEx participants. To open the chat window, please click or tap on the text bubble icon on the right side of the WebEx toolbar. Testimony were received as follows. First, written testimony was due by noon today. Those could have been submitted or emailed to board@hbws.org. Or it could have been faxed to 808-748-5079. Another way we accepted testimony was by mail. Written testimony to our address here at 630 South Beretania Street, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96843. We also accepted online testimony at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. We are still accepting telephone testimony at this time. If you are here to testify, or if you would like to testify, please call 808-748-6040. Again, that number is 808-748-6040. And when prompted, you will receive directions. You will be placed on hold, and we will open up the line one by one to allow you to testify during that part of the agenda. If you would like to access materials for today's meeting, you may do so at www.boardofwatersupply.com/boardmeetings, spelled out. The meeting will also be viewable via live streaming on our website. Again, that's www.boardofwatersupply.com/live, spelled out. Today we have two items on our agenda that require board action. Item number one requires board action to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held last month on September 27th, 2021. I hope members have had an opportunity to review these minutes. And if you have, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes at this time.
So moved. I second.
All right, it's been moved by member Sword, seconded by members I'd like to open it up for any discussion, and please let us know if there are any amendments, corrections, or modifications needed. Hearing no discussion, I'd like to call for the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the regular meeting held on September 27, 2021, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right, motion is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting held on September 27, 2021 is hereby. All right, we have item number 2 on our agenda today. And this is to determine the role of the board in the redevelopment of the Beretania complex and creation of a permitted interaction group pursuant to section 92-2.5 subsection B of the Hawaii Revised Statutes. Chair recognizes Manager Lau and Mr. Michael Matsuo, Land Administrator in our Land Division.
Oh, thank you, Chair. This is follow-up on the discussion with the board from the other month's meeting. We recommend the formation of a new permitted interaction group pursuant to HRS section 92-2.5B for the purpose of visioning and redevelopment of the Board of Water Supply Beretania complex. The statute does require that, 2 or more members of a board, but less than the number of members which would constitute a quorum, could be assigned to this permitted interaction group. And the points here, investigate a matter related to the business of the board. The scope of the investigation, scope of each member's authority are defined at the meeting of the board. So it's kind of a clearer job description for the members. Also, the resulting findings and recommendations are presented to the board at a meeting of the board in the future. Deliberation, decision-making on the matter investigated, if any, occurs only at a duly noticed meeting of the board held subsequent to the meeting at which the findings or report is presented to the board. So the following meeting. It's important to involve the board in this effort. It's an important opportunity to ensure the long-term use of the Beretania complex adequately serves the needs of the department and our ratepayers. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Is there, and I think we did discuss this last month. Is there any further presentation, or is there any discussion?
I have a question. It may be for the attorneys, but I think this is a multi-step process. One is envisioning, 2 is investigating how we implement what we envision, and then 3 is to actually proceed with those votes necessary to redevelop. I think it should require coming back to the board, that the board agrees with the vision before we take the second step. Is that process, is there room in the PIG process for doing that? For having it be iterative, so that we have a vote in between and the PIG is not guessing as to where the board is, but rather that we confirm whether the board agrees or not before we take the next step.
Thank you for the question. I think this is appropriate for maybe your core deputy that supports the board to provide her thoughts. Jessica, can you respond to Ray, please?
the way that I understand permitted interaction groups to operate is that the PIG is given an issue to look at. They go research it, and then they make a recommendation to the board. Generally, at that point, the PIG terminates. I I would think that they're probably, I don't think there's any kind of set rules. Just you got to avoid the pig being a standing committee. So if you go back to the board and say, this is what we're looking at. What are your thoughts on this before we go research more? I mean, I think if you do that once or twice, I don't think that would be prohibited or be considered a standing committee, but I wouldn't go further than that.
Okay,
Does that answer the question?
yes, that does. That's wonderful.
Okay, so given our council's, opinion, is there any further discussion?
No, do you looking for a motion, Mr. Chair?
I am.
Okay, I'll make the motion that a pig be formed to explore, I guess would be the word. Maybe that's not the right word, but to explore the various visions that the board could pursue for the redevelopment in the back and the complex, Veritanian complex. I think the key word is vision.
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead, modify. I just off the top of my head here.
I think the role of the pig should be to engender a process for the board to determine a long-term vision for the site. And once the board has agreed on a vision, the pig should return to developing investigating all the steps necessary to implement that, present that back to the board, and then finally to develop a proposal as to how, the final proposal as to how we implement
Would that be on the second step or the third step?
I think that's the third step. I think there's there's a third function. I
Yeah,
don't know if there's a step in between 2 and 3, but
Yeah.
that's a third function. I think there's a separate set of work all around how we implement, and then a proposal to the board for specific action to be taken in order to achieve the work necessary to achieve the vision.
so I guess the motion, Mr. Chair, would be the formation of the first pig to vegetate the vision, I guess would be.
Well, engender a process that
Yeah,
where
right, yeah.
the whole board can participate. in
Yeah,
the vision.
and I think what you're saying, Ray, is the first one would be the vision. What was, I think we had that long discussion last meeting on, we really don't have a vision, so get a vision, come to the board agrees, so that's the first. My motion is the formation of first pig. Because
Oh, okay.
based on the advice of council, after the pig does its job, in this case, the vision, that disband and another pig gets formed.
No, I think she said we can do multiple steps.
This is Jessica. Hi, Brian. Can I maybe recommend, the pig process isn't as simple, and perhaps I need to give you something in writing, because actually this is the first meeting in terms of the formation of a pig, and it needs to, before the full board, the scope of what they're investigating and the scope of each member's authority have to be defined. So I don't know if you're ready to do that yet exactly.
So, Jessica, if I hear correctly, we should consider tabling this to next month while we get further advice and perhaps craft a more precise role of the pig. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I recommend, because according to OIP guidance, there are 3 meetings that have to occur before you can take action on a matter investigated by the pig. And I think we probably are not all familiar on what all those meetings need to accomplish at this point, correct? And instead of me briefing you on the entire subject matter, it might be a better use of time to postpone the formation of this pig until next meeting, until I can provide you, Brian, with more detailed summary of what you need for a pig.
Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you say that there needs to be 3 meetings of the pig before a report is filed?
At the back end.
Before the board can take action on a pig's recommendations.
There has to be 3 meetings?
3 meetings. First meeting has to be formed, scope of the investigation and the scope of each member's authority is defined. The second meeting, the pig presents its findings and recommendations, but the board cannot discuss or act on the report at this second meeting. If you want, and then a third meeting, if the board wants to discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on the pig's report, then that's the third meeting.
I'm sorry.
So let me, mind if I ask?
Yeah, you
Member,
see, so it's
Sue.
not simple. So, I mean, it'd probably be easier if maybe you saw it in writing and you could more properly craft a plan.
Jessica, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Let's step back. Let me tell you what I think we're trying to achieve, and you tell us what's the best tool or vehicle in order to achieve that. One is our frustration was that when we were working was that it was, we felt we were working in a vacuum. And that therefore, we really needed the wisdom of the entire board to determine a vision. So it requires the whole board talking about what we should be doing with this site. And then the role of the pig would be to follow up that directive as to, okay, this is the vision. Now, given that vision, what are the steps necessary in order for us to implement the process to achieve that vision, to actually develop the site? And so it is iterative, and we can't have we can't propose a process and then take 3 meetings to approve that process and then have a visioning process. And it would take us 2 years before we came to the end of what we're looking for. So our frustration is in the idea of how the pig works, period. And I've been involved with enough public agencies that I think that there are easier processes than that. And it may not be a pig, it may be something totally different. Maybe it's some kind of workshop or something. And I'm turning to you to give us guidance as to how we achieve the vision without extending this out so far before we actually come to an agreement on a vision. There must be a simpler process.
Yeah, Jessica, I'll be straightforward. I've been involved with a number of pigs and we've never taken 3 meetings to come to that conclusion on that. So as Ray said, there gotta be a simpler way. I mean, we've had 1 meeting, even the last pig we had, we didn't have 3 meetings before we met. We just had problems meeting because of different circumstances. So I would rethink that if you don't mind.
It's based on OIP guidance. So it's not something I crafted myself. I could see how OIP guidance might not have been followed if it wasn't researched or found beforehand.
So I think what Jessica is trying to say is that the 3 meetings includes the formation of the pig as well as the pig's report back out after it does its work. And
I
then-
think maybe there might be, I'm sorry, Brian.
No, is that correct so far? First
Yes, it is.
meeting-
Yes.
Okay, so first meeting is to form the pig. Second meeting, the pig reports back out to the board. And then if the board decides to execute on the on the PIG's recommendation, that would be the third meeting, right?
Okay, so I can tell you what the first recommendation, if we were back in our pig, our first recommendation would be, we need a visioning process.
Okay, wait. So Jessica, is that correct? The 1, 2, 3?
Yes,
The three
that's exactly correct. Yes.
Okay, so we can form the PIG today, but we need to be able to define what the role of the PIG is. But if the goal is for the entire board to come up with a vision, then we need a different vehicle, because then the PIG can only have a,
That's what I'm saying.
okay,
Yeah, okay, well.
Chair, if I could offer maybe
Yeah.
something for the board to consider is that perhaps maybe it's not appropriate to move forward with this recommendation today to create a PIG. But in the intervening month between meetings, I could work with board member soon, and we can sit down and talk about a process, whether it be a visioning workshop or other means. Because I can understand, I think where board member Soon is saying, you gotta begin with the end in mind. You gotta have a vision of what you think we want to try to achieve with this property.
I definitely understand that. And so my next question was, is it possible to have a strategic planning or other workshop where all members can?
I think if we agended it and, like we have a budget workshop.
Yeah,
where we
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
Broad discussion,
That's what we need, I think.
get feedback. The board takes no vote at that time. Then after that, maybe the board can decide if creation of the PIG is appropriate to actually implement or move on to the next stage. There is a item coming up, which is the strategic planning. And then that we were also seeking the creation of a PIG to participate in an update of our strategic plan, which has very specific tasks. The strategic plan, the development of property, could even be one component of the next 5-year strategic plan. And the PIG members on the strategic plan could weigh in and provide input. Ultimately, the plan will be approved by the whole board at a future action. So either some options.
So it wouldn't be a pig, basically. It
Well,
would be more of a strategic,
Well, a PIG for the strategic plan too, so that a subset of the board members can actively participate in the strategic planning process. But
so,
I'm just throwing out the idea that maybe I could collaborate with board member soon and try to have some clarity on some of our options going
Okay.
forward.
I'm happy to participate in that.
And I'm not trying to, there will be more than just myself and board member soon and my staff in this process, but something for the board. Maybe next month, we might be able to come up with some recommendations on process, which could include PIG or no permitted interaction group.
We should look at the process you used in order to develop the first strategic plan.
Yeah.
Let's look at that, let's see.
And actually, that was a permitted interaction group. I think 3 board members acted, board chair, vice chair, and I think board member Matsui, I think at the time. Yeah.
Okay,
well, then why can't we just, since we're in discussion, this on the agenda, agree to it now and get going with it?
I think what your counsel is saying is that at least we have to be specific enough on these role and functions of and basically the job for the PIG members on this info.
Oh, okay.
If we feel comfortable in doing
Yeah, I
that.
just thought the board member, I mean, the idea was to work on the vision to come before the board. I just heard you say that.
Well, that's another approach is to actually, for me to, outside, between the meetings, to have a discussion with board members soon. And try to see, okay, if the first part is visioning, then what is the process that maybe supports creation of a visions for this property? And it could be a workshop at a regular board meeting, open to the public. It could be, use of a permitted interaction group.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with the public sitting in and listening. Which may in fact negate the need for a pig, at least through the visioning process. And reduce the number of necessary meetings. I don't think we cared, but I think it's healthy to have the
Yeah, and
public to at least listen to the conversation.
And if I could use as an example, like how for even the water system facilities charges or rates, we came to the board first to ask the board guidance on some guardrails upon which to kind of guide our efforts going forward. And then we went out and then came back to the board, with a revised proposal for board's consideration.
I think that's what Vax and I were struggling with, was the lack of a clear process to how we were gonna arrive at.
Yeah.
So if what you're suggesting is we sit down and try and come up with that, and bring it back to the board, from that discussion, make a decision as to whether we need a pig or not. And if we do, then a formation of that pig at that time.
Yeah.
That's for me.
Yeah, the prior efforts to redevelop the property was kind of driven by a market analysis to trying to determine what the market was, but that was a little different approach here.
Yeah.
This approach is more, let's start with the vision or the end in mind first, and then how do we achieve supporting that vision?
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that during the interim between this meeting and the next board meeting, the department, together with maybe some board members, will come up with a recommendation as to the process through which we develop the vision for the redevelopment of the complex.
Yeah, in terms of process of vision development, but I would try to make sure that we don't run afoul of the sunshine law, that we have too many board members involved in that effort. But maybe just for you, Jessica, if I could ask you a question.
Certainly.
Oh, thank you. Would it be allowable to have up to 2 board members participate in trying to help me, work with me to define a process going forward for the property? Or some recommendations for board consideration for next month's meeting?
I'd have to look into it, but I believe that might be okay.
Yeah, could it be under, like strategic planning or something, Jessica?
Uh, No, just
No?
board participation so we don't run afoul of
Yeah.
the sunshine law.
Yeah, you get,
And I also suggest that maybe one of the attorneys sit in to make sure, so that we don't just keep circling back to how we shouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, I would be fine with
Just
it. too.
everybody stays in their lane. Is that what you're
Yeah.
trying to say?
Okay, well, I think for today's meeting, I think,
So can I move that we table this?
yeah, I don't think we need a motion to table,
Okay.
right? Do we need a motion to table?
It's an action item, I think
I
you
don't know.
need to
Who's the parliamentarian here?
you
how about
should
you,
check.
defer?
Sorry, Jessica, one more time.
Did we get a second? If we didn't get a second, it failed. Did we get a second on that?
It did not.
It did not, so then it fails.
Okay, so we're just gonna pass on this. Yeah.
Just move on it.
So no,
Jessica, is that okay? We just pass on this, pass it to the next meeting, or do we have to take a motion to table?
I don't believe you have to take a motion to table now.
Yeah, that would be my.
so
Let's
no,
defer to the
no
next
action.
meeting. Yeah,
Huh?
I would say defer to next meeting, defer the issue to next meeting.
Okay, yeah, we'll defer to the next meeting. Okay, thank you, everybody. Next on the agenda, we are at the items for information. First item for information is the proposed development of a petition for the designation of a groundwater management area in Waianae, Oahu. Chair recognizes Mr. Barry Usagawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We're presenting a brief to the board. Our intention to petition the State Commission on Water Resource Management for the designation of the Waianae Aquifer sector as a groundwater management area. Largely due to climate change, decreasing rainfall, and those impacts, which I'll go through in the presentation. But I'd like to first introduce our consultants that are joining us today from Kahalavai Consulting, Mr. Jonathan Scheuer and Ms. Bianca Isaki. Also on our team is Kathleen Pahinui, who's going to help with the outreach, and Nancy Matsumoto, who's our chief hydrologist, geologist. So we're planning a pretty intensive, comprehensive outreach effort as we start to build this petition. So with that, I can go right into the presentation.
Please do.
So protecting Vai for Waianae. And just so to define what designation is, it's a regulatory action to select an aquifer or aquifers to establish administrative control over groundwater withdrawals. So basically that's what that is. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about what is being proposed, why is the Board of Water Supply petitioning for designation? Why is it needed? Who we will outreach to, and what happens if the Water Commission approves the designation. So next slide. These are all of the aquifers on Oahu. There are about 26 of them, and they're grouped into aquifer sectors. And Waianae has 5 aquifer system areas, they call it: Keao, Makaha, Waianae, Lualule, and Nanakuli. And they have about, anyway, there's sustainable yields for each one of those, but I'll get into that. Next slide. So these are the water management areas that have been designated by the Water Commission in blue. You can see on Maui, it's the Iao aquifer. On Molokai, the entire island. But on Oahu, all the aquifers are designated except Waianae. And so it is sort of inconsistent on how water is managed that way because of that. And because we have the largest population in the state, it stands to reason to place Waianae under more administrative control. But this is just the background. Next slide. So we are intending to petition the commission to designate the entire aquifer sector, which is instead of individual aquifers. And this is from discussions with the commission. They suggested the sector, and we agreed. And so our petition is being developed for all of the 5 aquifers there. And it purpose is to increase the protection and management of groundwater resources equal to the same level as the rest of Oahu. So consistency across the island. Because currently, only in Waianae, if any landowner wants to drill a well and pump groundwater for any use, it's with limited regulatory approvals on the amount of use and despite potential detrimental impacts. And so we're seeking more regulatory authority there. Next. So what is being proposed? So in the designation process, it provides a formal public process to discuss Waianae's competing water issues, including but limited to potential decreases in sustainable yields, water availability for affordable housing, Department of Hawaiian Homelands and Agriculture, opportunities for water conservation and reuse to reduce freshwater use, our forest management activities and strategies, also discuss stream habitat and traditional customary practices, and the goal is to balance water resource protection and management in the context of watershed health. So it allows us an opportunity to discuss this with the public. Next. So the State Water Code 174C41 states that when it can be reasonably determined after conducting scientific investigations and research that the water resources in an area may be threatened by existing or proposed withdrawals or diversions of water, the Commission can designate an area for the purposes of establishing administrative control of the withdrawals and diversions to ensure reasonable and beneficial use in the public interest. Next. The code further establishes 8 criteria that can trigger a groundwater designation. Any one of these could trigger, and what we have highlighted in bold are the criteria that we believe apply to Waianae. So number 1 is whether an increase in water use or authorized planned use may cause the maximum rate of withdrawal to reach 90% of the sustainable yield. Number 3 is whether regulation is necessary to preserve diminishing groundwater supply for future needs, as evidenced by excessively declining groundwater levels. And this is where the impact of climate change comes in. And then serious disputes respecting the use of groundwater resources are occurring. The other criteria have to do with water quality, saltwater intrusion, and increasing chlorides. We're not seeing that in the our Waianae sources. There are mostly dike sources that when you pump them, they just, you get air. So you don't get saltwater intrusion because they're not sitting over the basal. We only have 2 basal sources, but the chloride levels in there are within our limits. But we are seeing declining water levels in our dike sources there, especially in Makaha. And there's no other water development projects that we are aware of in number 8 that would result in any of the above conditions. So, and there's no excessive preventable waste of groundwater. So we think it's the 3 that are bolded, and we'll be preparing the petition along those lines. So next slide. So this is 2016 data of the 5 aquifer system areas in Waianae. There's a sustainable yield, and the average production NRU is not no reported use, and you can see that Waianae and Makaha are close to, or in fact exceeding, the 90% threshold of sustainable yield. But this is taken from the adopted 2019 Water Resources Protection Plan. That's the plan that the Water Commission uses to set sustainable yields and other things. But so the data will be updated. We have reduced our production in Makaha in 2020, so we're not close to 90% now. However, there are several vacant urban zone lands in Makaha that could increase the authorized planned use to approach 90%. So those are triggered, those criteria are triggered. This criteria is triggered in Waianae and Makaha, we believe. Next. So why is designation needed? And we want to, it's essential to elevate the protection and management of groundwater resources in Waianae equal to the rest of Oahu. And this helps to sustain our mission and vision of Kawaiola, water for life, and safe, dependable, and affordable water. But specifically, designation is needed because, as I said, the Waianae aquifer meets the 90% criteria, and Makaha, with the authorized planned use, could increase to 90% of sustainable yield. But specifically to climate change decreasing causing decreasing rainfall trends. And as rainfall decreases, groundwater levels will decrease as well, even though we are pumping, as you can see in the previous slide, we're pumping below aquifer sustainable yields, and we're seeing some decreases in water levels in certain areas. We know that temperatures are increased with climate change and increased CO2 emissions, and temperature will drive up water demand as evapotranspiration rates increase. So as supply is trending down, demand could be trending up, even though there may not be as much growth planned for Waianae, just because of temperature changes due to climate change. And then we are trying to be responsive to the Waianae community, advocating for designation to proactively avoid serious conflicts. We do not believe it's serious yet, but we know that by doing nothing, it's just, it's not if, it's when that they may happen, and we want to be proactive about it and discuss these issues now in a designation process. So designation will serve to provide more clarity on these climate change impacts and the resource management and infrastructure challenges, which I'll go into, and the difficult decisions needed to mitigate those climate risks and uncertainties. So to have that discussion and lay everything on the table, basically. Next slide. We know that UH has trending precipitation downward. This is from up to 2007. Not sure what happened in the last 14 years, but on Oahu, 0.9% of rainfall decrease per decade from the period of 1920 to 2007. And the long arrow is minus 4.9% decrease in precipitation from 1978 to 2007. We're seeing this statewide. Next slide. And when we look at the rainfall isohyets or lines of equal precipitation or equal rainfall, what's on the left was from our Oahu Water Plan from 1970. And we show 100 inches annually in Ka'ala, 75 to 100 inches in the high recharge areas that supply water to the aquifers and streams. It was very surprising that in 2011, to see rainfall drop so much from 100 inches to 65. And you can see that occurring throughout the Waianae Moku. With decreasing rainfall will result in declining water levels. Even though we may not have monitoring wells in the other aquifers, we are seeing that in Makaha. Next. And then in a look forward, that was a historical view. In a look forward, you've seen this before in some of my presentations, the 2100 rainfall forecast using 2 downscaled climate models from the University of Hawaii. They show decreasing rainfall in Waianae. One thing that they, is certain, that both models show is that there will be decreasing rainfall in Waianae, in leeward Oahu. As much as 65% in the statistical model, which is in the top wet and dry season there. If that is our feature, 65% reduced rainfall will reduce aquifer recharge and sustainable yield. But even in the dynamical, in the dry season, they're showing, between 10 to 20% less rainfall. Whether or not we will see an increase in rainfall in the wet season is yet to be seen. But designation now will prevent, excessive amounts of groundwater development, only to find out that, hey, if we're in the statistical future, it's just going to be decreasing. So, that's one of the main reasons why, we feel like it's time to petition for designation. Next. So there are implications to the Board of Water Supply, certainly for climate change impacts. Our sources in Makan and Waianae could require reduction of sustainable yields if they continue, if rainfall trends continue to decrease and higher temperatures are experienced. But it could happen even without designation. So I wanted to point out that designation doesn't necessarily cause sustainable yields to be reduced. They can do that now. But it does offer a higher level of administrative control over withdrawals. You may know that more than 1/2 of Waianae's drinking water is imported from Pearl Harbor, the aquifer sector. So Waianae's freshwater security depends on water sources in Waianae and approximately 16 miles of our transmission system, including transmission pipelines, booster pumps, and reservoirs that bring water into Waianae every day. But as if increasing freshwater input into Waianae, if we have to do that because of reductions in sustainable yield, it will require new source booster pumps and transmission infrastructure that could translate into higher costs in our CIP, depending on how quickly that has to happen. If you can space it out over time, less impact. If we have to do it really fast, it could result in higher water rates, which could result in elevating affordability and equity issues for low-income and elderly customers on Oahu, and which is especially important in Waianae. Next.
Okay,
And there are regulatory implications to the board too, if they set in-stream flow standards, which they are looking to amend the in-stream flow standard for Kapuni Stream, which is in Waianae Valley, which may result in stream restoration mandates to disconnect and release gravity tunnel water. But we have been discharging Waianae Plantation Tunnel 3 back into Kapuni Stream, largely because it was a Department of Health sanitary survey requirement, because they couldn't inspect the tunnel because of a large boulder, blocked the tunnel. But when we did that, we lowering our water system capacity. There's less dependability and resilience to Waianae Valley. So real quickly, the last couple of slides, I'll just showing this next. So the plantation tunnel 3 is on the circle on the right. We did find a big leak on the 4-inch, which was repaired. These are the tunnel sources in the back of Waianae Valley. Next. So when we had to cut it off, we severed the pipeline, but we discharging the water through this outlet valve. And this happened in 2012. So it's about a little over 100,000 gallons per day is being discharged into the stream. Next. And interestingly, it took about 7 years before the water in the stream down at the bottom started to show perennial flow. What's in the left is 2015, what's on the right is 2019. So you can see how much water is actually flowing in the streams now. Next. 2 more slides. So what happens when they approve the designation? So all large users are required to prepare a water use permit based on existing use. And we have 1 year to do that from the date of designation. And the application process is really not insignificant. It can be challenged. So there are some risks by having to go through designation, but we may not get everything we want. But the commission has the authority to set the water use permits based on the 7 criteria before you. Next. Forward. And so who will we outreach to? The communities have been expressing concern about water management and how to proactively plan for restoration and resilience in Waianae. And these came from Waianae elected officials, the neighborhood board members, non-including high school students, and the concerned elders of Waianae have raised this concern. So we're initiating comprehensive outreach thanks to Kathleen's folks and our consultants and it would provide important feedback for the petition development and to elevate community awareness of the many important water issues going on in the area and the benefits and requirements of designation, because there are reporting and the justification of use and that kind of thing. So we're just starting our outreach, and we will be going and seeking input from the elected officials, neighborhood boards, Department of Hawaii and Homeland, agencies and homesteaders, the farmers, landowners, and associations, and any community group is interested in talking about it. So we are pursuing with that currently. So, and I think that's it. Next. So thank you for your patience. There was a lot of slides, I know, but it's important, but challenging effort. Open to any questions you may have of my consultants and I.
Members, any questions?
Yeah, Barry, are there any specific users who are gonna be, in your mind, probably adversely impacted by the new regulation? Why is Waianae not covered? Why has it been uncovered all this time and everybody else has been? What has prevented that?
Yeah, we asked ourselves that question as well. There was just not that much water in Waianae, I guess, at the time. We started to develop our sources in Waianae and Makaha valleys in the 80s. By 1990s, it was complete. But yeah, it was never done. The old groundwater control areas, pre-water code, pre-1987, designated, the North Shore, the Central Corridor, right, Wahiawa, Pearl Harbor, and Honolulu. Windward was designated in the early 1990s, 92, I believe, but Waianae was never. And so all large water users have to submit a water use permit, so we could expect perhaps the military to ask a lot of questions about that. They have sources in Lulule, and perhaps I think in Makua. But it's basically just justifying what you're using the water for and reporting its use. It's just, we can't manage a resource if you don't know how much water is being used. So it makes a lot of sense. But what doesn't make sense is that Oahu, being the most populous island in the state, it has two different permitting systems for groundwater use. And we only are petitioning for groundwater, not surface water. There's just not any flowing streams there. But yeah, there are a lot of small users as well, which we're trying to verify now. There are numerous wells there that there are very few records of it. So, who's using water, how much and where, and what for? Is it reasonable and beneficial? A lot of questions are unanswered, and we feel it's time to get those answers. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
It just feels like some users were protecting themselves and therefore didn't allow the system to expand into Waianae. I just wonder who is that? It doesn't sound like you have an answer to that.
yeah.
Okay. The only other thing I was gonna add is putting on an old hat I used to wear. Please don't just talk to the homesteaders, be sure you talk to the commission at the HHA.
Yes, we definitely.
Thank you.
There are a lot of Hawaiian homelands in Waianae and Lulule and Anakuli and vacant, and we don't fully understand how much water they will need. And I might add too, the importing water is not as simple a solution. There's limited capacity in the Evo Waipahu systems. We are pursuing a seawater desalination plant, yeah. So they're in Kamo Industrial Park. So water source is not that plentiful. We still have some challenges with sources we're working on. So, but the important thing is to have those discussions and get everything on the table and develop the petition accordingly. So, Jonathan, you have anything to add there? If you would like.
No, I think you covered it all very well, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Yeah, quick question, Barry. You mentioned that the military has a big, or they have a user over at Honolulu, which I understand. How many more private wells do you know there are out there? Jonathan, would you know that?
I can pull up some data we just got from the Water Commission today, and because the commission had actually previously been undertaking a process to try and contact the landowners for registered wells sometimes the land has changed hand a number of times, but I think it's around 160 wells in the entire sector. Some of which have been actually now documented to have been lost, either covered with dirt or somehow not locatable anymore. The majority of water is taken by production wells, the majority of which are BWS wells and a few large wells from the military and some private purveyors.
But Max, a question about how many wells is important, because even the unused wells need to be properly sealed and abandoned, or else they could become pathways for contamination or also waste of water.
Well, yeah, well, that's kind of the reason why I asked it, because besides the question that Wayne asked about who's going to be impacted, you know, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you might find just one well, that could really mess you up, you know, if it's not properly handled. And
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we do have a handle on the number of wells they are, and when, you know, hopefully we can get this passed, that when it becomes part of our Kuleana, that, you know, we have everything covered, basically, is what I.
Yeah.
So knowing the number, of course, is important.
So the Board of Water Supply, excuse me, the Water Commission has identified 146 wells that are smaller wells that they've had reporting issues with. They've still have 6 that they need to contact. They've outreached to everybody via mail. They've conducted 68 site visits. So about 82 of them they consider done. They've either determined that the well's been lost or they've made successful contact, and there's still another 42 of people they're trying to get a hold of. Sometimes these are landowners who are on the continent.
Yeah. Well, I one more quick question. I'll shoot for just I'm skipping. When, you know, I hope that they do designate this the way we want it to be designated. When it does, when we do get that designation, are we responsible for all those individual wells if something happens?
No,
No?
every owner is responsible.
We're responsible for the ones we own. And,
Yeah, no, I'm talking about, you know, once it becomes, or I'm talking about what you mentioned, you know.
Actually, the responsibility is with the commission to regulate all wells and
Okay.
even require the wells that are unused or abandoned be properly sealed.
Okay, so, it does, you know, it's not a liability on our part, if
Correct.
some crazy person doesn't report his well and it gets all messed up.
With the water code, it transferred to the commission.
Okay,
The responsibility.
okay. All right, that's all, just wanted to make sure.
But of course, if the commission moves to close down some of those wells, those people are gonna end up being our clients. They're gonna come to us for water.
If they're using water or continue to use water, but if their well is just unused,
Yeah. Then
yeah, that's the problem too. What concerns me is the wells that are lost, they cannot find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's always gonna be some unknown well, someplace in somebody's backyard that, you know, that.
Sometimes they also pose a safety hazard especially if it's a large diameter well,
Yeah.
or somebody could fall into.
Okay, I just want to make sure that liability wise, that it's not something that will be settled.
We're just responsible for our well.
Okay.
All right, members, any further questions?
Brian, I have a question.
Sure.
Oh, first off, mahalo, Barry, to you and to your staff for your presentation and for your work on this, especially for being proactive on such an important issue. It's incredibly refreshing to see these issues coming forward proactively until, unlike, you know, many other situations where we're in an emergency and having to respond. So thank you for taking the initiative, especially given the climate threats that we're facing. I did have a couple of questions. Oh, actually, first, just with respect to Ray's question, no one petitioned for Waianae. I mean, that's why it was never designated. It wasn't on the commission's radar, and there weren't any, unlike Windward, Oahu, or other places where you had very vocal and organized advocates who are seeking proactive protection, folks weren't as organized on this particular issue in Waianae, so it just got left out. And so I think it's long past time for us to address this. But I did have two questions for you, Barry. One, what's the timetable for the IFS for Kapuni Stream? And then two, I was wondering if you had considered the idea of co-petitioners, especially given the interests. I know in 2018, I met with some DHHL beneficiaries, and I know that both the commission and the homestead associations are very, very concerned about this issue.
Yeah. Great questions, as usual. Timeline, we asked the commission, they're working on Kiiki in North Shore. It seemed like they're working around the island. I don't know if they had a specific timeline, Jonathan, on when they would get to Kapuni, but after they get through North Shore, they already worked on Haiku and Koinui, I believe. But yeah, they have a report on their website. They've done a lot of the research. It's just a matter of when they can get to that because it's statewide responsibilities, but no timeline. But I would think next year, maybe, perhaps. In terms of co-petitioners, that's a good question to ask when we do our outreach, Jonathan. If the HHL perhaps would be interested, I think it would add more weight to the petition itself. I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
So I will share that just in my personal work in Waianae before this, as well as with Dr. Isaki, folks have approached us before and tentatively hey, you guys know how to go through the petition process. Are you interested in designating? So there's certainly people who might be interested. I think it absolutely is something that we should approach in our early interviews with community members, with both the commission, as Commissioner Soon, our board member Soon mentioned, as well as homesteaders as a possibility of a higher level of involvement in this process.
Mahalo.
So Chair, this is Roger. Just a suggestion or a thought is for the list of outreach targets. Might want to consider the One Water panel and the city's Committee on Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience. Thanks.
Yeah, we can definitely do that since we're on the panel.
We
So-
are on the panel.
And we're funding the facilitators. So yeah, we can definitely do that, Roger. Thank you for the suggestion.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay, any further questions, anybody? If not, thank you very much, Barry, for the report.
Actually, Chair, if I could ask maybe just one question tangentially.
All right.
Yeah, Barry, thanks so much for the detailed report. And this is maybe just a tangential question, but pretty much every meeting we're in, we're talking about climate change and how that's affecting everything from water mains to what you brought up on the Waianae coast and right, the climate change mitigation efforts are coming up as well with across spectrum, right? DOT and pretty much everyone. And so it's two parts. The first is who's responsible at the Board of Water Supply to really be tracking, and then secondly, whose data are you using to look into the future to get a sense of what might be happening with respect to water? Because as we know, everything from Chip Fletcher through to some of the government officials, we see like a pretty broad range of forecasting into the future, both near term and long term.
First, your response, who's responsible? Are you talking within the board or across agencies or?
Yeah, within the board, like,
Okay.
who has the jurisdiction, or the kuleana, I should say, to really be tracking and thinking about how this affects us system-wide, whether it's water in pipes or, size of aquifers.
That would be water resources. I defer to Ernie's thoughts on that as well. I mean, we've been trying to be engaged as much as we can. So go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, Lehu, Yeah, the primary lead, like I'm doing these studies and this research and looking at the data is with Barry and his team. They do an excellent job. Work closely with the United States Geological Survey, which is a good source of data and information. And we actually collaborate with them to support some of their data gathering and their studies. Also with the University of Hawaii, the Water Resources Research Center, Tom Giambaluca, and other researchers at the University of Hawaii. And through Barry's, efforts through the years, successful in getting an ordinance passed in the city council that requires the creation of the One Water effort in the Office of Climate Change, Resiliency and Sustainability. So that's a group, but also other divisions like our capital projects division, when it comes to changes in our water system standards, to look at different pipe material, different practices, and also even field operations will get involved because they have to deal with how do you repair a main break in the midst of rising sea levels, and the pipe's underwater and you got to do the repair. So I would say it's primary lead is water resources, but we also have the support of the other divisions at BWS. So kind of a team effort here. Barry, back to you.
And to your question, Board Member Anthony, on data, it is our intent to coordinate and kind of collaborate with UH and USGS on directed research needs that would inform what the future would look like so that we can then adjust our long-range plans accordingly. And there's kudos to them to come up with the downscale climate models of rainfall. We've actually inserted that into our vulnerability assessment with the Water Research Foundation on climate vulnerability, and have come up with a dry and wet scenario on what would happen if those two different extreme rainfall scenarios come into reality. It's about monitoring them, and what to do about it. So more of that kind of directed research is needed, because right now the two models they're kind of divergent. It's like hey and a wet. And it would be good if they could come together and say, yeah, we agree on a convergent future, but they are entrenched in their camps and their models are, solid. So, but, more discussion, more, research, perhaps more, I don't know what it would take. But we are doing other research too in Makaha on transpiration in the native forests to determine what kind of long-term impacts rainfall reductions may have on recharge there through Tom John Baluka, but also with sea level rise. Chip Fletcher is leading that. We are looking at a groundwater tidal groundwater well network for town to track more exactly what the tidal water levels are versus relative to certain properties in Waikiki. So we're looking for any kind of opportunities for that kind of directed research that makes sense, because the more we know, the better we can manage the future. We don't have that capability to look forward. But if you tell me how much supply we may have, I can tell you how to manage, I can, in the CIP or long range plan, we can develop those types of scenario, mitigation and adaptation. So that's the piece, and that's why we rely heavily on UH and USGS.
Yeah, I've seen Chip Fletcher's program a couple of different times, his PowerPoint presentation, and some of the forecasts are alarming. I mean, really alarming, especially in Kaka'ako, right, and Waikiki. And I'd just be really curious to learn more about what that does to the aquifer and the water table. So in your reference to being able to measure some of the tidal range, I think that's an important piece. So thank you for all the hard work.
Once we get to Mopunapuna we're working on Mopunapuna now with the One Water panel to determine what to do with mitigating sea level rise. So when we come up with a definitive report, we should be able to do informational briefings as well on that. So whole objective from already was is to keep you folks informed and to keep us moving in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Okay, everybody, if there is nothing further on this item, I'd like to thank Barry and the department for being so proactive on this very important issue. I'd like to move on now
Hey,
to the
Jonathan.
next
Thanks, Paul.
item for information, which is item number 2. This is the update on the 2018-2022 Board of Water Supply Strategic Plan Performance Metrics. Chair recognizes Ms. Ellen Kitamura.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Is my audio okay? Can you hear me?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Chair Andaya and board members. Dee, if you could just, or Joyce, just switch to the presentation. I'll be giving a presentation a little different from what I've done in the past, but it'll be on the 2 previous strategic plans that we have undertaken. Then I'll go into updating of the performance metrics for the past fiscal year. Next, please. Okay, so this is the agenda for today's presentation. Like I said, I'll be giving a brief overview of our last 2 strategic plans, then report on the 2021 annual performance metrics, and then lastly, review a proposed schedule that we've developed for the next 5-year strategic plan for fiscal years 2023, 2027, since the current strategic plan will be ending June of next year. Okay, next, please. So we have had 2 recent strategic plans that I have a snap of the covers here. The first one that we developed was a 3-year plan, covered fiscal years 2014 to 2017, and that's in your upper right. And the second plan was the 5-year, that's our current plan now, covering fiscal 2018 to 2022. Next, please. So I'll be reviewing the first strategic plan. This plan was developed by the Board of Water Supply Senior Management Team that was comprised of the manager, myself, all of the program administrators, and then a permitted interaction group was also created by the board, which consisted of 3 board members. Next, please. So the first strategic plan reaffirmed the Board of Water Supply's vision of Kawaiola, water for life, and then also the mission to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future. Next, please. As part of this plan, we developed 3 overall sustainability goals, and for the 3 primary areas: resource sustainability, operational sustainability, and financial sustainability. So this slide shows the general descriptions associated with each of the sustainability goals. That's in the second column for the first strategic plan. Next, please. So along with the 3 sustainability goals, there were strategic objectives and action plans to carry out the goals and objectives. And these were identified as part of the first plan. And then you can see it in, I have it actually in 3 different colors. So the first one, the green, are the resource sustainability goals, objectives, and the action plans. The blue, purple, I guess, is the operational, and lastly, the light blue is the financial. Next, please. So the second strategic plan was also developed by the senior management team, and then another permitted interaction group consisting of 3 board members were also created to assist the team. Again, we reaffirmed the vision and the mission. And the 3 sustainability goals in general were retained, but then were refined as well. The descriptions were refined, as well as the strategic objectives and the action plans. An important addition was performance metrics. This is an important component that we felt was needed to measure success in meeting our goals. And these are the performance metrics that we report annually to the board in October. Next, please. So an overview of the sustainability goals, like I said, the three general areas were retained, but we did refine the description. And then this table does show the difference between the descriptions for the first strategic plan and the second strategic plan. Next, please. So the strategic objectives were also looked at and again, and additional goals were added to both the resource and financial sustainability objectives. The action plans were also reviewed and updated to reflect the changes in the objectives. So this slide here shows the strategic objectives and key action plans associated with the resource sustainability objective. Next slide. And this slide shows the objectives for the operational and the financial. So there was some discussion earlier about the Baratanian property. So if you look at the first sustainability, it goes for the financial and financial opportunities. In the action plan, the last, let's see, third bullet, the last bullet, there was identified that there would be that we would execute the RFP for the Baratania complex. So it is a part that was identified. An action plan was identified. Now, due to circumstances, this was not this did not happen. However, as we redo our next 5 years, this action item can be carried over into a new strategic plan. So, in general, we are asking for the strategic plan to have a permitted interaction group, but their emphasis of what they're going to be looking at is much more general. The permitted interaction group that you're thinking of creating for the Baratania complex is just a part of the strategic plan itself. Next, please. So these are the performance metrics that were developed with the second plan. We have 9 performance metrics. What you see here are the ones that are associated with the resource sustainability goal. And in the slide, it shows the metric, description of the metric. So being engineers, you know, we love our formulas, but it does show how we use data to calculate what the metric is. And then the third column is the purpose, and then also what we're trying to monitor. Next, please. So these performance metrics on this slide is for the operational sustainability goal. Next, please. And the last one is for our financial sustainability goal. Next, please. So now I'll go over into the actual performance metrics. This is a table that shows the overall summary for fiscal year 2021, and then also how it compares with the previous fiscal years. The performance metrics that did not meet the targets are shown in red. That's in the third column. And the next few slides, I'll be going over to explain why the metrics were not met, with the exception of the pipeline leak detection metric. That is the second from the bottom. We did report last year that this performance metric is undergoing reevaluation because the board is piloting a new leak detection technology called Utilis. The system is using satellite-based technology and has a capability to detect subsurface accumulations of potable water. So what happens is this allows our detection efforts to become more targeted. and it results in more effective use of our resources. So the team, instead of sending out the leak detection team to kind of systematically survey the entire water system for leaks, we're able to deploy them into areas that Utilist has targeted. So we feel that it's better use of resources. So for the most part, the miles of pipe surveyed does not have the meaning as it does before. Mark Chan of our Water Resources Division and Jason Nikaido of our Field Operations Division did give a presentation last year. And if you would like to get an update, we'll be happy to do another presentation for you. Next, please. Okay, the stable head levels. Now, this was a metric that we did not meet. We did not hit our target last year. The Baratania Station index well declined by 1 foot in fiscal 2021. So this index well is primarily influenced by the pumpage at the Baratania pump station right here on this campus. The graph on the top left shows the average pumpage for fiscal year 2020 in gray and 2021 in green. In the early half of fiscal 2020, the higher pumpage at the Baratania station was attributed to reduction of pumpage at Halaba. So you kind of see that kind of drastic high pumpage, and it goes down. And it went down mainly when Halaba Shaft was placed back online. And the Baratania station, you can see the pumpage significantly reduced. And then from there on, I guess in October, it started to, the average was average pumpage was below the pumpage in fiscal 2021. Now for fiscal 2021, we believe that the increase in pumpage, and that's the green line, was related to the lower than normal rainfall in fiscal 2021. And Barry had talked about this in detail in his previous presentation. What was measured is the rainfall index that we keep track of, average about 86% below the normal rainfall. And there were only 3 months in fiscal 2021 that the rainfall was actually above normal. So pretty dry year. Kalihi Pump Station was also is also offline for renovation and could be also contributing to the higher pumpage at the Baratania station. Now the chart on the lower right should look familiar because that's part of the monthly report that Barry does. So it shows the head levels at the Baratania index station, and of note, and that's the top blue line. The Baratania index well does have additional head capacity. So even if it did, we did see a reduction, it didn't go into the critical. And right at the end, you can kind of see a little uptick. So we're hoping that the aquifer is recovering. Next, please. Okay, so this chart shows our employee departure rate. So this performance metric, the departure rate went up from 7, which was our target goal, to 8%. And the increase partly could have been due to COVID-19. We have seen that there were more retirements in fiscal 2021. And less hiring. However, we are still aggressively recruiting, and we're hoping the next fiscal year that it will be better. But then, as you can see, from when we first started tracking this metric, it was at 13%, and we've been able to bring it down to 8%, and hopefully we'll do better next year. Okay, next, please. So this chart should look familiar. It is the main breaks that you see when we report on our how we're doing with main breaks. So the chart on the left just shows both the annual number of main breaks per 100 miles as a line graph and the total number of main breaks for each fiscal year as the bar graph. We mentioned previously that meeting this goal is, and our target is 300 main breaks per year, or about 14 main breaks per 100 miles of pipe. It is a long-term effort. It is tied to our ability, our pipe replacement program, which we're targeting to replace 21 miles of pipeline in 10 years. So we have a model that estimates that the annual number of breaks will increase, and that's that kind of orange line, until 2025, and then flatten and then start to decrease as we hit our target of 21 miles for pipeline installed. Next, please. Okay, so moving into the proposed schedule. So we're currently in the planning phase. This is the October to December 2021 timeframe, and that's the first column. What we're hoping to do is in January, meet with the board and request to see if they would participate again, create a permitted interaction group of up to 3 board members. And from February to May 2022, we'll be holding workshops with the PIG and then also the leadership team to develop the new 5-year strategic plan. We also have a stakeholder advisory group that's planning to meet in April, and timing-wise, we're hoping that we'd be able to create a working draft of the strategic plan and present to the SAG for their comments. Moving along, then in June, do the permitted interaction group report and presentation of the draft plan to the board. And then in July, hopefully if everything works out okay, then acceptance of the permitted interaction group report and adoption of the new 5-year strategic plan. Next, please. So I just include a slide here, and then this is something that was shown earlier when we were talking about Baratania. The language in the HRS, and this is highlighted in cyan, that describes the rules regarding the creation of the permitted interaction group. Next, please. Oh, and that's it. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for the update. Members, any questions?
You know, the 7% departure rate, is that net? Is that departures minus hires, or is that a pure departure? That's just departure.
Actually, it's a good question. Ellen, on the departure rate, and maybe Michelle Thomas can answer that. The 8%, I think it was 8%.
Okay.
Is that the net departure over hires for the year?
Yes, yes. So it is employees that have, just based on the number of employees that we have, how many have retired or resigned or left.
Yeah, so just to clarify though, because we're also hiring at the same time that people are leaving, so at the end of the fiscal year, what is the net loss for the year?
Yes.
So that is the net loss over.
That's the net loss.
Yeah. So I guess, oh, go ahead, Michelle. Was that incorrect?
Yeah, no, that's correct. It's just to add to what Ellen is. It's a ratio that determines the comparison between how many we hire as well as how many we lose over the fiscal year from July 1st through June 30th.
Yeah, and I guess I do have some metrics here. So in fiscal 2020, we had 20 retirements, 19 resignations, or people have left, and 55 new hires. And then compared to that, in 2021, we had 28 retirements, so more retirements. The amount of resignations and people just leaving were the same, 19. And then we did hire less, which was 42 hires. So it kind of sees why we went from 7% and increased to 8.
I would also like to add that the difference between the 7 and 8% was really the additional retirement of one additional person. Given the fact that the board is not a huge company, one extra person leaving does severely impact our metrics.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I've got a few.
Okay.
So, I'm just looking at the summary for, fiscal year 2021. It seems, there are several metrics that we, consistently have trouble meeting. And there's, so yeah, let's just start with that. So next strategic planning, is that something we can revisit and kind of take a look at, like what the reason and maybe a plan going forward?
Yeah, we can do it in the strategic planning process, kind of drill down into the data.
Okay.
And look at some of the root causes.
Okay, good. And then, can you explain a little bit area of watershed survey? I noticed that the target, we're blowing the target out of the water. What is, can you describe it?
Okay, I might have to ask Barry for assistance in this, but this is, I guess when we first started the target, it was kind of something that we were just starting with, but it is part of the work that we do, water resources that go out and take a look at uh, areas within the watershed for invasive species. So they do work with the watershed partnership group and then look to see how many acres in this case we were able to work with those partners to survey for invasive species so we can protect our watersheds. So that was part of the resource sustainability goal.
Okay, well, really good. I think that's all the questions, that I have. I mean, I do have a lot of questions in terms of, some of the metrics and, trying to get a sense of whether these targets are still attainable or do we need to readjust it and what we can do to, better attain them. But, at this time, no further questions.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on this topic or this item? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Ellen.
you.
Yeah, thank you for the report and the update. I'm going to move on to the next item for information, number 3. This is the update on fiscal year 2021 Water Master Plan Performance Metrics. Chair recognizes Mr. Barry Usagawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So you go to the presentation, please. Next slide. So the master plan identified 6 primary steps on how water is delivered from source to tap. So sustain, capture, treat, move, store, and deliver. And these performance metrics, they help us monitor and maintain the health of the water system, as well as identify opportunities for improvement. Next. They're rated by color code. So the 33 metrics, 19 were in green, meaning we met them or on track. So green is good. Yellow is we missed the goal by less than 10%. Red is greater than 10%, so we have 10 of those. We can get into that. Next. I won't go through every one of these, but if you have any questions on them, I'm pointing out the red ones, non-potable water supply sources as a percent of our total potable water system. Goal is 6%. We are kind of flat on at about 7%. Recently, we're seeing the potable demand decreasing a little bit under 145, but we are still producing about 10 mgd of brackish and recycled water. With the installation of our new reservoir system in East Kapolei for R1 water, we expect that to increase, but it hasn't done so yet. In terms of budgeting for watershed management, we brought this up with the stakeholder advisory group as well. For watersheds, while we have increased our conservation budget, our watershed budget has been fairly flat. And so we are going to have some discussions with our watershed partners in terms of how can we start to ramp that up to meet that 4% goal. I might add that the 4% in the Water Master Plan was with a CIP of 85 million. And now that we've increased it to 200 million, 4% of that is like $8 million per year. And perhaps we need to revisit that because that is much more than the capacity we have for our watershed partners to expend, but we'll see on how we can increase that. In fact, our stakeholder advisory group asked for a specific presentation at the next in the future SAG meetings on presentations by our watershed partners. Areas of the watershed survey for invasives, that's while invasive species committee is doing a great job looking for Mycona and other invasives, so that acreage is pretty high. There's no fencing projects recently, so that's 0. Our budget for conservation, while increasing, it's still not close to the metric, but there's quite a bit of funding. We are expanding from our residential rebates into proposed commercial rebates. We still have to propose that to the manager, as well as rebates for agriculture tied into our facilities charges for ag. So we're working on those. Next. In the terms of capture, we're fairly green and yellow, mostly in good shape. Although, as Ellen said, the drought did affect some of the pumpage, increasing demands and less recharge. So, next. Water quality, all greens for treatment. Compliance is exceptional. So, next. For the move category, the emergency PAR has increased to green, from red to green in 2021 because of the 4 permanent emergency generators have come online. So we've met that metric. Next. In the store category, we have 1 reservoir project that we pursue in Kalawahini in Papakolea. It's presenting its own set of challenges, but we do have proposed storage project in our CIP to address the storage deficient pressure zones. Next. Ellen went through this, so I won't, but notice that the main break average, this is a 3-year average, it's increasing as expected, but with increased main breaks, we're getting increased water loss. But we do have and I'll show you that. So next. So we talked about main breaks increasing. And so the non-revenue water has increased. These have 2 facets. One is it consists of what's called real and apparent water losses. Apparent water losses is meter calibration issues. And our AMR, automatic meter reading replacement program for MXUs, that's the radio controller, is about 75% complete. Once that's complete, we would have stronger confidence level on the reliability of our meter reads for billing. Our source meters are continuing on a 2-year cycle for maintenance and calibration. So our source meters are in fairly good shape. So that leads us to why is the non-revenue water increasing? And that's, as far as I can tell, we can tell, it's because main breaks are increasing and there's water loss associated with that. But also flushing for new pipelines in Eva, in Ho'opili and Koa Ridge, and flushing of our GAC carbon contactors requires a lot of water. So but we will monitor that and to see what we can do to reduce that. But unfortunately, I think it's going to take if you go to the next slide, the installation of our pipe replacement miles. What's in green is a 3-year average actual. And so once we set the 21 miles, it's steadily increasing. In blue is our 3-year estimated. So we're on track with that. Our 6-year CIP is proposing additional pipe replacement miles. So we're on track to that. But unfortunately, it will take pretty much a decade to get to an average where in 2030 we have 21 miles. But once we do that and we're working on our high priority mains, main breaks should start to decrease, and with it, non-revenue water on the actual water loss, real water losses should start to trend down. So next. So we're at 8.5 miles for pipe repair replacements. Ellen talked about the late detection, more targeted with Utilis, and the pipeline condition assessments. We did 4 miles in Campo Industrial Park tied to our seawater desalination plant in 2020, but nothing this year. Next. And the rest are green. So I think that's the last slide. If there are any questions, next slide. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
What is the time frame of the master plan? How long does this go out?
30 years.
So the ones, Barry, the ones where you have reds are consistently red often. I mean, they consistently miss the mark by almost the same amount. I mean, should we go back and reevaluate the goal and the baseline?
Yeah, that's a valid question. We will. I think the master plan is on a 10-year cycle. So it was adopted in 2016. So we should probably be starting the update in 2023 or 24, something like that. So in a couple of years, and we'll revisit the metrics to see.
The reason I asked that is that I'm assuming that the master plan is how we finance or establish the budget. I mean, we established the budget because we say we're gonna do this many miles of.
Yeah, in particular, the capital budget.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And if we're not hitting our mark, then we're collecting, I mean, we're setting aside money that's just not being used.
Actually, we are tracking to get to the 21 miles.
Understand?
That's one component.
So if I could interject on that one. So Barry, I think your indicator pipeline R&R, that's one that's consistently red. And it says the goal is 21 miles, but I think it's 21 miles by 2030 is what it is. So you're always going to be in red until 2030. Right?
Yes.
So maybe you just gotta like this graph, miles of pipeline replacement 3-year average. I think that's a much more indicative.
Yeah.
Instead of the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it looks like for 2021, and I'm really happy to say this, I just hope we can sustain it. But for 2021, it looks like we actually made the estimate. We estimated 8 and we got what,
8.5.
8.5. So that's really good. I hope we can maintain that. The yellow bars going forward. I'm not, and I'm not overconfident, but I really want to push for that. But so I think maybe some of the way it's
Yeah,
the red and the yellow, like
Yeah.
that part.
I'm happy to change the color and say that it's on track.
well, or perhaps the timeline for the metric.
But certainly, I think strategic planning is a good.
Yeah.
And I'm actually looking, really looking forward to it, so we can revisit some of these metrics and see whether it's still appropriate and make recommendations going forward and making adjustments so that we can better meet the metrics.
Thank you.
This is really helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move along. Barry, thank you again for a great
Thank you, Chair.
report.
Thanks, Barry.
All right, next item is number 4, recruitment status. Chair recognizes Ms. Michelle Thomas.
Good afternoon, Board Chair and Board members. Michelle Thomas, I am the Chief Human Resources Officer for the Board of Water Supply. I'm here to provide you with recruitment status for the period of July 2021 through September 2021. Joy, if you can go to the first chart. For the period of July 2021 to September 2021, we had 24 new hires, 3 promotions, 1 transfer, 2 demotions,
Joey, can you go a little further to this? Show the bottom of the slide too. Yeah, there we go.
20 separations, 25 new approvals to fill, and 7 canceled requests. Can you go to the next page, please? During the month, as you can see by the numbers on the second page in our recruitment and separation status, we were very active. We had at least 70 or so positions that were under recruitment of some sort for the past 3 months consistently. We also had quite a few promotions and as well as folks coming in from the outside to new jobs here at the board. The challenge we did have is that we did have quite a few folks who did retire or resign over the last quarter. And so as a result, we did provide you a third page that shows a projection of our retirements, because that has been something that has been coming up quite a bit. We also did have discussion about this earlier today on the board meeting. As you can see by this graph, you can see that there are quite a few retirements that are projected within the next 10 years. We have about 15% of our employees that are eligible to retire now, and you are seeing that in our numbers over the past few quarters. And then we have another almost 30% of our staff that are eligible to retire within the next 5 to 10 years. So we don't anticipate that the retirement numbers are going to be going down anytime soon. And as such, we are trying to do everything we can in our recruitment in order to make sure that we're bringing in qualified people. And as you can see from our previous numbers, we are working on that diligently and hope to continue to do that moving forward, even though we are in a difficult recruiting climate right now. That concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Quick question. On the retirement, is it more the skilled, in other words, engineers side or the frontline employees?
It's actually across the board. We have retirements in all areas. We are seeing it mostly in our supervisory and management because understandably, they're the ones who have the most years in with the board.
Okay.
Just to clarify, eligible to retire, does that mean they put in their 15 years and they're eligible for?
I think it's more than that. Michelle, depending on when you come in, what is the eligibility for retirement without penalty?
It actually depends on your age. What this means with the eligibility to retire means that they've met the age requirement and they've met the years. If you are 50 years old, you only have to have 5 years of service in order for you to be eligible to retire. Understandably, if you're younger, the eligibility requirements are more lengthy in the amount of time that you have to be in service. And if you are older, it's less. So we do that based on whether or not they've met their age requirement and years in service at the same time.
So it's sort of like 55 and 30. Yeah,
For full retirement.
for full retirement, yeah.
Yeah, and so this does not this number here does not factor in whether or not they're eligible for retirement with health benefits or anything. That it's just that they've met the age requirement and the years in service required to retire.
I see. Okay, members, any questions?
Chair, Jade,
Yes.
did we have any employees who have been terminated for not cooperating with the attestation requirements and the vaccination?
Unfortunately, we did have one individual that we had to terminate because they chose not to comply with the attestation. However, the rest of our employees have been very diligent about complying with the attestation and complying with the testing requirements for those who have requested exemptions.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess last question, what is their vaccination rate for the department? Approximate?
We're about 90%, a little over 90%. We have only about 40 individuals who have not gotten vaccinated, but they are complying with our requests for testing and have complied with the exemption process, which is well thought out by the city and have complied with everything that is required for them to be in the workplace.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this item? Okay, hearing none, move. Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas, for the report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Next item for information, number 5, is the status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Mr. Barry Usagawa.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members. We had 4 index wells that are in low groundwater status as of September. Pro City and Wailoa are in caution, and they're just in caution by a tenth of a foot. Kaimuki and Punaluu are in an alert. Kaimuki is largely due to the dry weather conditions, but also because the pump station is offline under repair. The monthly production is 144 million gallons per day, which is pretty good for September. Rainfall, we've had 2 months of normal rainfall in August and September. The 5-month moving average, though, is 74% of normal, so it's upticking, but good news, I guess, is the National Weather Service is forecasting still an above normal precipitation as of November due to the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and so neutral conditions likely transitioning to a La Nina conditions by winter, which should result in a wet winter or above normal rainfall winter. And the head levels are still decreasing, but we expect them to turn and as we get into the winter months. That's my report, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Members, any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Usagawa, for the report.
Thank you.
Next item for information, number 6, is the water main report. Water main repair report for September 2021. Chair recognizes Mr. Jason Nikaido.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Board. The following is the water main repair report for September 2021. In September, we had 23 main breaks compared to 37 the year before. And that brings us to a total of 91 breaks for the fiscal year. On average, it took 12 hours to repair pipes diameter of 4 to 8 inches. In addition, the leak detection team investigated 18 miles of pipeline and found 49 leaks, 36 of which were coupling leaks. That concludes the report for this month. Are there any questions?
Members, any questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Nikaido, for the report.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the regular agenda. We do have executive session today. May I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Babcock, and I think it was seconded by Member Soon. I'm sorry, Mr. Sword, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
those, okay, all those opposed say nay. All right, motion carries. Let's prepare the room for executive session.